and today we're again meeting with Chester Zimmer, who has been our town historian for a number of years and has spent a half a lifetime collecting information and artifacts and maps. And today, Chester, I'd like to thank you for letting us come, and we're going to talk about the churches, the three churches, the Methodist, the Lutheran, and the Reformed. But I believe the Reformed is no longer with us.
That's correct.
Why don't you tell us about the Reformed Church and how it came not to be?
Well, the old Dutch Reformed Church history is this. It was early. On April 15th, 1835, Ezra Gallup, the early landowner, sold 1/2 acre of land for $1 to the trustees of the Dutch Reformed Church. They were to build a basement story to be used for a select school, and the following year the church was to be built on the basement story. And this here's an 1985 picture to show the location of this old landmark, now gone. It's shown here, and here's the 1/2 acre of land that he bought right here at this corner that they've sold to the church. It's the outdoor end of the village, and it's the corner of Selleck Road and the Knox Road.
Let's just point out, Selleck Road goes this way.
Goes right up here.
The Knox Road goes from here on out through the bottom of our picture, and this is like the driveway to where the church used to be.
That's right. The church was right up in the back, right here where these trees are.
Okay, got it.
You'll see the church in just a next picture or two. I'm going to show you the picture of the church standing right here in this intersection. Here's an interesting advertisement of the Galville Academy. It's an advertisement of boarding, and they built a boarding house later on to the west, and I'll show you a picture of that. Now just give a few highlights there, Mr. Smith, of the...
Oh, wait a minute, the academy, where was that located? Is it located at the same spot as...
Yeah, the academy was the basement of the church.
The basement of the Reformed Church?
Yep.
Okay, this is the Schoharie Patriot magazine, or newspaper, on May the 6th, 1852. Gallupville Academy. The village of Gallupville, in which the academy is located, is easy access, being 26 miles from Albany and connected therewith by a plank road over which runs a daily line of stages. The summer term of this institution will commence on Monday, the 3rd of May next. Tuition per term of 11 weeks. Primary department, $2. Common branches, $3. Common and High English branch, $4. Higher English and classical branches, $5. Expenses, 25 cents. French and drawing, extra. A few pupils can be accommodated with the board in the family of the principal. Pupils received at any period of the term. Charges proportionate. No deductions made for absence except in cases of protracted sickness. Whether we instruct well or not is for others to say. We shall endeavor to discharge our duty in this respect faithfully. Moral instruction is particularly given because absolutely essential to individual happiness and that of community. Harvey Cornish, Principal, Miss Sarah M. Earl, Assistant, Gallupville, Schoharie County, April. That's an interesting commentary. I love the tuition.
That's right. Quite unusual from today's economy. Here's a picture of the boarding house. This was a 3-story boarding house that later was a private dwelling. This picture was taken around 1900 when it was owned by Charles Hiltz. It burned August 20th, 1940.
Now this is where the principal lived and said he would take in students.
I suppose so. I would assume so.
So that was right up there next to the Reformed Church at Selleck Road and the Knox Road as well.
Right in, it stood right in, but here's the church. Here's what we're looking for, the picture of the church. There's the picture of the church. And I don't know whether this is part of the house in the back. The boarding house probably sits right back here.
Mm-hmm.
Notice the sheds up here for the horses.
Mm-hmm.
This was in the heyday of the church around 1890.
And it looks like it's a brick building.
Oh yes, it was all brick. I remember it well. And
Okay.
I remember when it burned. It was a brick building, and they had a big revival there. And I think you might want to just make some remarks of that.
Okay,
That
let me read. Let me read. This is a very interesting article from the Schoharie Republican on December the 20th of 1883. Gallupville. Gallupville has been blessed with a great revival. 3 weeks ago, no one dreamed that a glorious work of grace was so near. Churches were cold. Prayer meetings were at discount. Only a few faithful ones were pleading in secret for God's coming and power, and though they discerned indications of better things. 3 weeks ago, the 27th of November, Reverend M.V. Kronk, at the invitation of the pastors of the Lutheran and Reformed churches, began revival meetings in the Lutheran Church. Here and there, one and another began to seek the Savior. Backsliders renewed their covenant vows. It was evident that the power of God rested on the preacher. The audience increased rapidly. Scores pressed forward as seekers after salvation. Such scenes of power have never been witnessed here before. One night, 42 came forward to be prayed for and instructed in the way of life. Soon, the building was too small to accommodate the increasing crowds, and the meeting was moved to the Reformed Church, the largest in the village. The interest increased, and it culminated on Sunday evening, 15th, when 900 people, all whom could find place in the packed church, Brother Bronk preached his farewell sermon. The love of the people of the town of Wright and their gratitude to the Reverend brothers and to God, who sent him on this blessed ministry, was shown by the enthusiastic collection over $218. End of the article. Fascinating.
And that's in Gallupville. Back in what date is that?
1883, over 900 people at that revival meeting.
110 years ago.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Here's another picture of that church. Just another angle, another picture to show that I have in my collection.
This is the bottom of the hill. Let's take it here. I think there's a cow standing here. And here we're pasture field.
Yeah.
And we're looking back up, and this is the hill that went up to the church.
Mm-hmm. And here is a real close-up. There's many postcards sold of this picture. That's probably copied from a postcard. That's a close-up of the front of the church entrance, and notice the steps are needed repair. The church was officially closed in 1908. I have a lot of documented history of the later years of the church, who was members, who was the trustees, so on and so forth, and the closing of the church. And some of the, I think some of the church or some of the, I don't know whether the organ or the pulpit or something went to the church in Howe's Cave, I believe.
Okay. I noticed there's a bell in the
Yes.
belfry in the tower of the church.
Yes.
But it was closed before it burned.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm. And this is a picture I took of with my old camera, and back in 1929.
Here's the church, and this would be the road 443 now.
Coming right into Gallupville.
Coming up to the Gallupville, here's the turn, as you would take you in town past the Gallupville
The church stood
store.
right up there on the hill.
And the church was clearly visible in this hill.
It burned in May 1932.
Okay.
And how it come to burn was people had renters, people living in what was the boarding house, took their house ashes from their wood stove out and dumped them near a little building right near the church. The little building caught fire, and thus the church caught fire and burned. We had no fire department yet. Probably if we had, it could have been saved. By the time Schoharie and Middleburg could get here, it was too late, and I remember it well.
Chester, here's a picture of another church. I think I remember. It looks familiar. But it looks different.
There are no early pictures of the Methodist Church, which was built in 1844. There was extensive remodeling done in 1896, resulting in practically a new interior, and I presume colored glass windows. As a boy, I remember donors' names on the windows. I grew up in this church. Sunday school every Sunday, so on and so forth. This picture dates about 1900 to 1910 and looks about the same today. Now we'll look at the Lutheran Church. The Lutheran Church was built in 1853, with a parsonage next door built in 1867. Around 1880, the church was beautified with genuine cathedral glass and Gothic windows and doors. A vestry was added. Also, pictures of this is about 1900 to 1910. Both of these churches, the Methodist and the Lutheran, both had horse sheds in the back. You can see, I think, in the back of this one.
What you're referring to is these windows, the Gothic, the pointed windows.
That's taken from a newspaper article. That's what they called them.
And the Methodist church windows were not Gothic. They had
the Methodist church windows are square and but colored, and I think the early ones were not of the colored glass.
But they have the Roman arch windows. Mm-hmm. Okay, move on.
Okay, there was a Methodist chapel. This today is about 3 miles east of Gallaville. Turn right off Route 146 onto Webster Road. Go about a half a mile, and here was an old settled farm of the 1850s. Here on the west side of the road was a chapel. It is on the 1866 atlas map of the town of Wright. I can remember seeing it when I was used for hay storage and now gone. I remember driving past there with my father and mother on a Sunday ride and talking about the old chapel, and I remember hearing people talk about it, and it was a Methodist chapel. Now there's an Eastern Christian church of Schoharie in the town of Wright. This has an early deed record of it dated 1841. The church is shown on the 1856 map of Schoharie County and the 1866 atlas map of the town of Wright. It was located on today's Westfall Road at the intersection with the Larry Hill Road. When the Christian church was built in Quaker Street, the congregation joined with them and the old landmark was torn down. About 1970, I interviewed an old lady, Mrs. Ockenpaw, who lived on the Larry Hill Road, that remembered the old church and went there as a girl. And it was called the Hemlock Church. And she didn't know why, except that there was some hemlock trees around it. And she remembered the church as a girl. Well, there was an early Methodist society of the Methodist Church. It was August 1965 when I was called to visit Mrs. Florence Hunting Williamson. She was born in 1880, died in 1973. She was breaking up her home here and moving to live with her son in Lacona, New York. She was my mother's cousin. She knew I was interested in history. I had visited her many times for information that she remembered. She wanted me to take these 3 old Methodist church class books.
I have them.
There's 3 of them. Because she felt I would take good care of them and would not be destroyed. Her grandfather was Joseph Hunting, a leading member of the Old Methodist Society for more than 40 years, and a class leader much of the time. The oldest book is the Burnham Circuit, when meetings were held at the old Knox Corner Schoolhouse from 1829, and that is early, through 1838. That's 170 years ago. This was before there was a town of Wright, as the township was formed in the town of Schoharie in 1846. This was before the churches were built in Gallaville. I am familiar with a lot of the names listed as some of my ancestors on at least 3 different ancestral lines. These books are at least attendance records that were kept. The next book covers a class conducted at the Barber Schoolhouse for the years 1838 to 1849. This schoolhouse was located at the intersection of the Knox Road and Brick Schoolhouse Road of today. At this early date, this area was called the Barber Neighborhood, after one of my ancestors, Isaac Barber, and he is listed in these books. The last book covering is 1850 to 1879. It does mention that Galville Circuit. We know the Methodist Church of today in Galville was built in 1844. In this 1850 to 1879 book, there's reference to Class 1 and Class 2. It appears that Class 1 was Galville, while Class 2 was the Barber Schoolhouse. These 3 old class books have been given to the Galville Methodist Church and are displayed in their historical collection. I borrowed them to make this videotape and will return them tomorrow.
Chester, it might be mentioned that the covers of these are leather covers. All of them begin with general rules of the United Methodist Society. They happen to look like that they did also pass for lunch.
That's right.
For a couple mice, at least the 1850 to 1879 and the 1839 to 49 got missed for lunch.
Just try to imagine where these books have been stored over those years in some bureau somewheres in the old hunting family, which was Florence's ancestors, and her grandfather, of course, had them and handed down through to her.
I think these books mostly contain the list of members of the church. They're not Sunday school books, and I noticed that they keep track of who was in church Sunday by Sunday, and it's listed P, which means present, A, which means absent, or S, which means sick. Mm-hmm. They couldn't make it, but they obviously kept track of who came, and I believe in this one there's a register of their giving, what they gave per Sunday. So very interesting, these books. Obviously at this time the churches were served by circuit riders, and it also, there's information in there about the conferences and the Troy meeting of the conferences, the Methodist Church. Very interesting book.
Also whether they were married or not.
And that's right, married or single. And I noticed that in some of them it mentions that they were died, or they were transferred, or transferred without letter, or was transferred with letter. Very interesting books, and it's fun to see all the names. Some of the names in there, Chester, are names that we would still recognize, like Schoolcraft, that are being around our village today.
Well, what's most interesting to me is my ancestors that are in that.
There's a few Zimmers in there.
Zimmers, Barbers, Schoolcrafts, and that's all interesting to me.
Now these are part of the United Methodist Church's collection here in Gallup.
That's correct. They have a cabinet over in the church that I think they have historical articles in, and I thought it was a place for them to be, and I gave them to them a couple of years ago.
And I think that I hope they're in a cabinet where they don't provide lunch for any more mice.
Well, I'm sure.
Wonderful.
I'm sure of that.
Chester, thank you for again sharing with us about the churches of our community. It's been a pleasure to visit with you again, and I trust that we'll be meeting again and sharing some more information about our wonderful town of Wright.
We got a little more here yet to do now.
Yes.
Here's this medal we got.
Okay, let's go over that. Let's keep going.
Okay. Look at that medal and see what you think of that. And I got the history of it here. It's in our family, and it's a New York City church medal.
It says, "The world is my parish, founder of Methodism." I think that's probably John Wesley. and it says Wesley Chapel, Parsonage, Johns Street, New York, dedicated by Philip Embury. It's a very nice medal. It's very defined, very well scrolled together.
Here's the history of it for me. My wife was Gladstone, grew up midway between Galville and Westbourne. She had a neighbor, Mrs. Minnie St. John, who was born in 1862 and died in 1939. I think the date on that medal is 1866 or 68. She was a long-time town of Wright resident. She gave Gladys this old New York City church medal. Back about 1985, we became interested in trying to find out about it and what value. I finally was directed to the Drew University Library at Madison, New Jersey. I believe this university is connected with the Methodist denomination. They informed us that the medal was produced in 1868 as a commemorative for the centennial of the organization of the Methodist Society, which eventually became John Street Church, the first Methodist church in America in the 1760s, before the American Revolution. We'll never know how Mrs. Minnie St. John of the town of Wright come to have it.
It's dated October the 30th, 1768.
A little bit more history here, Bob, that we have to cover. I have a copy of an old diary by a very religious man, and he writes about getting ready for camp meeting and going for several days and the good he received from fellowship with others. He lived in the town of Knox and attended both of these meetings. That's advertised here. Square newspaper, August 12, 1846. A camp meeting be held in the town of Wright on the former Abbott Place, a few rods from the stage road leading from Albany to Schoharie. The meeting will start Monday, September 7th and close the following Friday. Tent poles and fuel will be furnished on the ground for a reasonable compensation. Signed, H. Chase. Now this location was just west of today's county line on the Knox-Galville Road. Here's one more. Square newspaper, August 25th, 1853. Camp meeting will be held at the town of Wright on the farm of Brother Peleg Cheesebro, a few rods from the Schoharie and Albany Plank Road, being the grounds occupied for the same purpose last year. It's to commence Monday, September 5th and close Saturday morning, the 10th. Law in relation to huckstering will be enforced. That's interesting. Preachers and people of this and adjacent districts are earnestly invited to attend. Signed, Truman Seymour, presiding elder. Now this location was today's Route 146 and the first property in the town of Wright, west of the Albany County line.
I would gather the huckstering would mean that since so many people gathered for that kind of a religious meeting, there would be people who might be selling food or produce and taking advantage of the people that were present.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying they wanted no huckstering around their camp meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
So that about does up the history of all I know about the church and religious factors in the town of Wright.
Wonderful, Chester. Thank you again for spending some time and leaving us this information that you've discovered. I appreciate it very much, and I'm sure those that are watching have enjoyed it too. I hope you'll tune in again and catch some more of the programs that we will bring you about the history and the life of our town of Wright. I'm Bob Smith, and this is Chester Zimmer. Thanks, Chester.